Hi everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on scalable growth, where we're joined by leaders from three dynamic healthcare companies, each with a unique journey of transformation, innovation, and global expansion. I'm Michel Savini. I head our life science division at Argon & Co UK, and I have the pleasure of hosting this great panel today. First, we have Haleon, formed in July 2022 following a demerger from GSK. Haleon consolidated consumer health assets from GSK, Pfizer, and Novartis into a standalone global entity. Though newly independent, Haleon inherited a rich legacy of trusted brands like Sensodyne, Panadol, and Voltaren. And in 2024, Haleon reported annual revenue of £11.2 billion, reflecting its scale and resilience in the consumer health sector. To talk about Haleon's transformation, we have James Olsen. James, thank you for joining us today. I'll let you introduce yourself and your former role at Haleon.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, I guess, potentially for some. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you, Michelle. Really looking forward to this. A little bit about my background. I had over 20 years working at GSK and then in Haleon, primarily in commercial roles around the globe, headquartered out of London, but spent the last 10 years of that time working on the various different joint ventures, as you alluded to, with Novartis and Pfizer, preparing for what eventually became the Haleon demerger, the various different preparation requirements for that in terms of reorganizing, standing up a new operating model and reorganizing the various different functions to prepare for the Haleon listing, which was just over, as you say, 2.5 years ago. And in that period, I stepped up to lead the transformation across the Haleon organization as it listed on the London Stock Exchange and became that standalone business, establishing itself as a consumer health organization in its own right, rather than a division of GSK Pharma. But look, really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, James. Next is Seva Animal Health. Founded in 1999 through a management buyout from Sanofi, Seva has grown into one of the world's top 5 animal health companies. It's headquartered in Libourne in France, and it operates in 47 countries and employs over 7,400 people. Its estimated annual revenue reached $1.5 billion in 2025, and it's driven by strong performance in veterinary vaccines and companion animal care. And to talk about Seva, we have Loïc Jégou, who kindly agreed to step in last minute to replace Jean-Marcel Siette, who couldn't join us today. So thank you again, Loïc, and I'll let you introduce yourself and your role at Seva.
Yeah, thank you, Michel, and happy to be here. So I joined Seva 3 years ago, and I'm in charge of the European commercial operations for the company. So physically based, mostly in Libourne, as you said, and in the UK, and basically going to the affiliate around the continent. In a couple of words prior to that, I've been working 20 plus years in the animal health pharmaceutical industry. 9 years at Pfizer Animal Health at that time, another 9 or so in MSD, also in the animal health division, and then a couple of years in a very different pure service company in tech and logistics optimization, also servicing the pet care and animal care industry based in the UK. So a couple of words on Seva, as you said. So it's a very different company from the company James described now. So it's a company that started 20 years ago from 100+ million, multiplied actually 12 times already. It's still a private company. It's still a company going through LMBOs. So we are in the 6th LMBO in a row, and delivering actually the value for customers and shareholders who are still with us and investing further in the company. So that makes it a little bit of a different animal and very entrepreneurial. So I'll speak about that later. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Loïc. Great to have you with us today. And to finish, we have Alliance Pharmaceuticals Limited. So established in 1996, Alliance began as a UK specialist in niche prescriptions and has evolved into a global science-led consumer healthcare company with leading brands in growing overlooked categories such as Kelocote, Nizoral, Amberen, and MacuShield. With operations in over 100 countries, Alliance reported revenues of £180 million in 2024. Representing Alliance, we have Claire Bacon. Prior to Alliance, Claire also led the transformation office for Reckitt, a $14.2 billion health, hygiene, and nutrition company. Claire, thank you for joining us today, and could you please also introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Michelle. And lovely to meet you all. Sorry I can't see your faces, but I'm imagining them as we talk. So my name's Claire Bacon. I'm Chief Transformation Officer at Alliance. 20 years experience in consumer goods across 5 different functions. Most of my experience is in marketing and sales, and I moved into more corporate roles over the sort of, let's say, 5-6 years, starting with M&A and then into transformation. During my career, I've held different leadership roles in lots of different categories within consumer health and also outside of consumer health. And I've worked in large blue chips like P&G, Reckitt, and other smaller PE organisations such as Alliance, where I am today. I joined Alliance in December of last year. I'm responsible for driving our exciting corporate transformation to becoming a high-performing consumer healthcare company. And prior to Alliance, as you mentioned, I led Reckitt's transformation office. So lovely to meet you all.
Thank you, Claire. So that's our panel for today, and great to have you all with us. So these 3 companies, as you can see, are of different sizes, markets, and journeys. They exemplify scalable growth through innovation, strategic focus, and global ambition. And so now we'll dive into the stories and insights with our panel of speakers. So we wanted to start with building teams and leadership, which is a topic that interested a lot of the people joining today. So Claire, I wanted to start with you with a question around what leadership traits or team capabilities are essential for a transformation team as they drive transformational growth in today's increasingly complex and dynamic life science environment.
Yes, thanks. So I think we talked a little bit about the sorts of topics that you had all fed back that you're interested in, and we thought it was important to start with behaviours and leadership traits and capabilities, because that really is the foundation, of transformation. And I think I was thinking about some of the areas that I would suggest are the most important. And I'd say it's not just for transformation teams, but it's just as important for C-suite members or other leaders. I would start with proximity to what drives the business. So if you're setting up a transformation from scratch, or you're going through a large transformational change, which is the case, let's be honest, for most of us in life sciences at the moment, proximity is the most important thing. So think about how do you make this, let's say, livable for your employees? How do you make sure that you have your finger on the pulse of how the business is feeling, but also what drives the business? So if your business is all about commercial and delivering sales, as is the case in many consumer health organizations, having real proximity to people on the ground, whether it's general managers or it's their teams, making sure that as a transformation team or as leaders who are monitoring that transformation, you are keeping up to date on how they're feeling and the challenges that they're going through, I think is really important. I would also say that should percolate even into the structure of the way that you run that transformation and the team that you have that will be driving it. So I'll give an example of some of my experience at Reckitt. Making sure that I had a team that could speak the same language as those who were receiving the change was really important. So I restructured my team and ensured that I had in there a balance of commercial experts who had actually lived and breathed, working on the front line, but had also got really strong capabilities in project management or change management or transformation. So I think proximity for me is really important. I'd say the second one was pragmatism. And it's very easy once you start going down a path of transformation, it starts to almost become a bubble, right? It becomes a sort of a thing in itself. And you then think everything you do is around the transformation. Everything you think about is within the lens of that. And it's quite easy to build quite let's say, a large entity around that. So it could be reporting, it could be communications, all sorts of structures then get put in place to enable that transformation to happen. And when you start to do that, there's a risk that you can get carried away and you end up putting too much red tape around or too much governance. And that can then mean that you lose your connectivity to the business, but you can also slow yourselves down. So being able to be pragmatic about the way that you run that transformation is really important. And listening to what feedback you're getting from those on the ground and adjusting your approach to fit your type of business. So for example, the way I would run a transformation at a Reckitt is a very different way I would run a transformation with an alliance, because those companies are fundamentally very different. They work in different ways. They have different cultures within them, different sizes, different organizational setups, operating models, etc. So thinking about how do you fit that and adjust it for what's really required. And as I say, adjusting it as you go along the journey. And I think the final thing I would say is openness. So being able to put so openness and almost being approachable. So how can you transfer all these changes that you're putting through your organization into something that people understand? So almost put it in layman's terms. And I think this is something that's often almost underappreciated by those who are running transformation programs. Perhaps you've got project managers in a function that are doing something, or it could even be those at the portfolio level who are running that overall program or the overall transformation of the company. But being able to almost transplant all of those things that are going on and put them in simple terms for those on the ground to understand what it is you're doing and why you're doing it is so important. If you don't do that, then there's a risk they'll often see these changes as something being done to them, and almost something that they can leave almost at the sidelines. And one of the things I did a lot of work on, both at Reckitt and also within the Alliance, is thinking about how do I position the transformation as a key enabler for us to deliver the growth that we're trying to achieve in the company. So thinking about how you connect that through the journey of your, let's say, strategy is super important, rather than having a business strategy and, oh, by the way, there's this transformation that we need to do to, let's say, improve our capabilities or systems, whatever else it is. So those are the three things I would say. So it's proximity to the business, it's pragmatism, and then openness.
Thank you very much, Claire, for your answer. Very complete. And actually, just to open on the same topic, I have a panel question for the three of you. That scaling sustainably requires not just the right strategy, but also the right people. And so how are you developing the next generation of leaders who can operate confidently in both the scientific and the business dimensions in life sciences? Loic, you want to go first?
I can start. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you just, it's valid in any organization. Yeah, well, the question you put on the table. If I just frame it now in my current experience in CEVA, and that's valid in every organization. Like Claire said, you need to adapt what you're designing and scaling up based on the business objectives, but also and primarily on the culture and history of the organization. And I would probably have answered differently in previous companies, MSD or other companies, than I would do today at CEVA. And because what will make a team and a leadership team or leaders successful for the company at CEVA is significantly different. And so I'll take that example. And what we try to bring as much in every individual, but in every team, is a set of values and behaviors. Again, back to what Claire started with, rather than, I mean, of course, the skills you will learn, but fundamentally, it goes with courage, it goes with agility, and the foundation of everything in CEVA from the start, because of the history of the company, and that's specific, is entrepreneurship. So it means whatever your role, whether you're leading a plant, manufacturing site, you're the CEO, you're head of digital transformation, you're exposed to the clients. And in this company at CEVA, if you do something that is not delivering customer value, means at the end value growth, profitable growth for the company, then the project will be quickly either not validated or cut. So you need to have people at every layer and every leadership position who embody this entrepreneurship, courage, agility. Yeah, it's a fast-moving organic company. It's not a processed company. And our CEO describes it in a very nice way, and I think that applies to everyone in that company, is that the circle is a representation of that organic flexibility and agility. The square is a kind of the backbone and the process, and and we're a hyper growth company that accepts that the organic growth of the company, the agility, is bigger than the infrastructure, and the infrastructure copes with it as we go. Yeah. So by structure, by nature, the infrastructure is running behind the business development, and we need leaders who are able to evolve in that environment where you're constantly, a few steps beyond what your company can actually support, and that's the way it is, and that allows fast growth. But there is a bit of a risk taking and courage that goes as well. Yeah. So that's a type of characteristic behavior we try, number one, to continue to develop in future leaders, but also because the company grows very quickly, we onboard new leaders, and it's always this fine balance, that we are looking for. So again, I hope that brings a touch to the discussion. Again, my answer would have been very different in a more processed and established company.
Thank you, Loic. James, anything to add from a
Yeah, I think a lot of what I heard absolutely resonates in terms of what would be required to be successful. I think there's a little bit of an over focus in this area, distinguishing between scientific and commercial kind of dimensions to the question. I think in most organizations I observe, you need to have a balance of the both to be successful. You need to ultimately be focused on whether it be the patient, the consumer, or the customer. And depending on your role in a cross-functional team, you'll bring your different skills and expertise to that. I think successful organizations and successful teams understand the different strengths. And to Lloyd's point, the agility, the flexibility required is critical. But you don't want to operate in silos. You don't want to put too much emphasis on one particular skill set. If you listen to the three of us in our introductions, I think you heard different experiences and backgrounds, and each of those are additive in terms of what we've all learned and what we've done within the different organizations. And you need different perspectives and challenges to really be successful and test whether it be financials or scientific claims, and credibility and problem solving is not unique to one or the other. So it's having that dimension, I think, is really important, rather than just I am going to go through have a career in R&D, or I'm going to have a career in marketing. Be prepared to experiment, try different things, and good organizations will support that, place people into roles on whether it be short or medium term assignments, and harness those learnings so that people can understand their respective businesses and sectors in a more powerful and meaningful way to translate that to growth and the opportunities of the organization.
I totally agree, James. I think the squiggly careers is the future of work, right? It's being able to adapt your skill sets and learn new disciplines is going to become more and more important even into the future. I'm sure the next generation will have multiple different careers almost within their lifetimes. And I think actually it's a real secret weapon for a company to have leaders who have had a rich tapestry of different experiences and different functions. I think like you said, the sort of the split between commercial and scientific and science, for me, I don't see it that way necessarily. I think in every member of an organization, whether you're in scientific affairs or R&D or any of those or commercial, you need to appreciate what one does for the other. And I think the more commercial scientists can be, the better, because they're going to develop solutions that are right for the consumer or the patient. They're going to be closer to really what the business is all about. And I think to that end, it's going to stores or going to hospitals or going to vets, even wherever your outlets are, being more closer to that end user is really important.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you all of you for sharing those insights. Now, let's move to scaling markets and global expansion. And for that, I thought we would maybe start with you, Loic. So Seva operates globally across 4 franchises: ruminants, poultry, swine, and companion animals.
Which
And
might
you
sound
are
a
now-
bit exotic for some of us in the line, actually. Yeah, exactly. But yes,
Indeed.
these are real nice businesses. Yeah.
And now your Seva has become the 5th biggest pharma company in animal health and the 2nd
Yeah.
biggest in biotechnology. So can you tell us a bit more about this growth journey and what is next for Seva to continue scaling up?
Yeah, and it's interesting. You know, it's a company, and I will not give a name, but when I was 10 years ago in a larger company, yeah, and I remember I presented to the CEO at that time. I thought the CEO, the president of the division, and Seva was somewhere at the bottom of the competition list. And I mentioned it, you know, they're doing something interesting. And the answer I got at that time was, listen, that's a generic company. Okay, it's not a competitor. So you know, don't spend your time. And today, you know, these companies are head to head. Yeah. So if I describe very briefly, so it's a 25 years now. This company started as the first phase. You know, we could call it like the surviving phase. Yeah. So it's a company that was spun off. Nobody wanted to buy. Yeah. So it was a small division in Sanofi that nobody really wanted to buy. Competitors declined the offer, and a handful of managers just banked their house and bought out the company. Yeah. And they took it out, and that was 100+ million at that time of generic businesses, generic products, a bit in Europe, you know, a bit in some of the African or Middle East countries. That's it, yeah, without differentiation. And then the first phase, and that will come to your question, the first phase of growth was survive, remain independent, and build a business, a pipeline, and most importantly, customer reach. Yeah? So the first phase was acquiring products, even not very expensive, not very differentiated, but build a portfolio and get foothold in countries. So through acquisition of small companies with a couple of products that could be expanded, small distributors who could be an access to the customer. So really, that was phase 1 actually, and for a number of years. Yeah. Then after that first phase, the second was to start to really build something which is going to provide sustainable growth and build pillars for the future of the business. And that's when you saw emerge the focus on vaccines, which was nowhere near the initial portfolio. So it was a strategic choice. And also to pick priority on some market and some species, yeah, because we are organized in species. So and poultry was kind of a smaller, fast-growing, open to innovation in vaccines, and not necessarily the top of mind of the big players in the market. So obviously a good choice to, you know, to get on a good wave. That's been very successful for the following 10 years or so. And since the last 4 or 5 years, I would say, now this company, as you say, is the 5th. So there are bigger companies, but there are also a lot of smaller companies. It's basically present in all significant markets now. And now the challenge is to challenge the leaders or take leadership in the segments that we have been focusing on, yeah, historically. So poultry, for example, some areas in companion animal, yeah, in some sectors where we've built expertise, to consolidate and focus the product on blockbusters and emerge blockbusters, while until now it's been really spread and we have a long list of products ready to emerge now, big products, big markets, yeah. And finally, the last one is to invest when acquiring, not investing necessarily in access to a country or as a market, but acquiring technologies, biotechnologies, DNA technology, and so on, to build the future pipeline beyond vaccines and differentiate vaccines. So you see the journey basically starting from, you know, you basically have to find customers to sell your products and to find customers initially to get going, you know, and pay the bills and grow the company and achieve the targets that, don't forget, it's an MBO. Yeah. So the investors have to want to reinvest. Yeah. And then second phase, really having a baseline, emerging championship area and the differentiation portfolio, and that was vaccines. And today is getting to be on the front stage, yeah, in terms of biotech acquiring top technologies and we are probably the company that is the most active now for the last 3, 4, 5 years, acquiring breakthrough technologies, human health technologies transferred into animal health. The only vaccine, RNA vaccine, and the first one was transferred into animals by Seva. So that's really the next phase of development for that company. So take things in stages and make sure that you build the future, but you also deliver every month and every year, because investors need to be with you at any moment. So that's, I would say, a summary.
Thank you, Rick. What a great way to illustrate today's topic about scalable growth, because it's a fantastic growth journey that you've been through with Seva. And maybe just to open the question to the panel, as global markets evolve, we've seen the situation with the US tariffs, for example, and regulatory expectations tighten. How can life science companies build scalable yet resilient global operating models that balance growth with compliance and patient safety or animal safety?
I'll happily make a start and then open it up to others to follow. I think it's a real challenge for healthcare at the moment to balance the different requirements of the broader geopolitical landscape. That the news is fast moving and very fluid. As you mentioned, I think resilience in different parts of your organization, whether it's demand forecasting, supply chain, procurement, etc., is going to be continues to be even more critical. I think also diversifying from whether it be one customer in one country or one country as your sort of primary focus, you've got to have a broad business, I think, to be successful. And that does open up, as you mentioned in the question, there is a regulatory element to the different requirements of being having all the right approvals, whether it be the US, Europe, Asia, etc. There's a lot of growth coming in different countries at the moment, but a lot of effort required from organisations to be prepared to do that at pace. So I think this is a topic that will be critical for several years to come in terms of how organisations adjust to an ever-changing landscape. And I think data is critical as well, actually understanding where your organisation is in terms of its portfolio, literally being able to track real time where products are, where demand is going to be required, and that will allow you to better forecast and anticipate. But I think it comes with a degree of risk for organisations because of the changing landscape.
Thank you, James. Claire, anything?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a hot topic, obviously, as we all know, and I'm sure will continue to be a challenge for all of us. I think in Alliance, we benefit in some ways because we're what we call an asset-light organisation. So we don't have our own manufacturing, and we work with sometimes direct, but also through distributors. That can be a positive and also can be a challenge, right, from a complexity perspective. But it enables us to have a network that we can call on, when we need to make changes or when we have crises to manage. And I think although not every organization has that benefit, it's so important to have the almost risk management discipline within the business. So thinking ahead, thinking 2 steps ahead, and thinking about what are the enterprise risks that you might be facing in the future and what could the options be. Think a little bit outside the box of how you might solve for those. And then the crisis management part. So when you do hit a roadblock, who is your go-to team that pulls together, and how do you do that? How do you gather together and rally around a challenge and come up with a solution to it? So I think having those 2 ways of working are already established would be highly beneficial to any business. And then, as I say, being flexible and nimble as you can in your infrastructure is also a great way to go.
Thank you, Claire.
Try to add, although a lot has been
Rick.
said in one sentence, if you allow, is it was said by both, but you won't take out the risk, but you want to de-risk as much as you can and as quickly, because new risks are coming. Yeah, so you don't want to pile up actually the risks. And it's not just regulatory, as you mentioned, tariffs, geopolitical access to the market, and so on. That is actually part of the evolving challenge. So you need to accept that your value chain, your market access, and not everything will be perfectly optimized at a given point in time for a given situation. But you increase your resilience, basically, and being able to, supply markets from different manufacturing sites, potentially, that costs money, but that needs to be done. Localize your manufacturing maybe on different continents to ensure access to markets, in more complex situations. So yeah, that is a mindset shift that you're never going to be, if you want, the more you want to be resilient, the least you will be optimized at a given point in time. So it's a fine balance between both, yeah? But definitely you need to have multiple feet on the ground, different geographies where you have different businesses, and to be ready that if you got one arm cut, then the company keeps going, yeah, and keeps growing from somewhere else. So I think that is almost in the design, yeah, it needs to be integrated from the beginning. Yeah.
Thank you, Loic. Good. So maybe now moving to a third topic on innovation and technology, and this was from the people that signed up for the webinar, that one of the topics they were most interested in. So James, maybe start with you on this one. So Haleon initially inherited the DNA of big pharmaceutical groups. We talked about GSK and Pfizer and Novartis. How did that affect Haleon as a consumer health company, and how much did the company need to reinvent itself once it became a standalone business? And more specifically, how did it ultimately affect innovation given the differences between a consumer health and a pure pharma player?
That's a great question, and one that could probably take up several webinars and papers to discuss in terms of the opportunities. As I reflect back on the Haleon journey, I think you have to put it into context of this was a 6 or 7 or 8 year journey, depending on where you start the question. And I think on reflection, the company has gone through a substantial reinvention over time. Whilst it may have worked as in many ways a standalone division of a broader pharmaceutical, the wiring of that organization, whether it be cultural systems, technology, was far deeper than people had fully appreciated, because we tried very hard not to distract the running of the business, those running the business, from actually the transformation that was required. And I think it was also a deliberate choice, because if you'd have laid out the changes required in terms of the transformation, it would have been an awful lot for people to appreciate, possibly even too much in terms of how much would need to be done. And therefore it was done relatively discreetly in phases to help people build their confidence in the new organization. The senior leadership team were very clear on what the direction of travel would be, but I don't know how well that was always appreciated throughout the different levels of the organization. And when it actually got to a point where the new organization was listed, Haleon as an organization had to create its own identity. It wasn't an organization that chose to sort of take a name on that had organizational relevance. It didn't pick up on one of its sort of more impactful brands. It was a deliberate choice to call it something very different, and might make that point of, as I say, difference to both internally and externally, but had to justify what that would be, what that journey would look like. And then it was almost part one completed, new organization listed, and then the full changes of the operating model, fixing some of the issues that the organization had inherited in terms of legacy systems, platforms, changes to senior leadership, a significant turnover at the C-suite level throughout the different organization as the business tried to bring in leaders who were familiar with the types of changes that would be needed in line with the new operating model, in line with the growth plans of the new executive team and a newly formed board. So it was quite a challenging period for people to be part of, because there was a significant realization of just how much was required, and also deliver the numbers. Every organization has to deliver its quarterly performance. You can't operate in splendid isolation. You have to, particularly when you're a new organization who have been very proactive in terms of engaging with the city and the analysts, you have to deliver the performance, because that's how you create that track record and that confidence. So there was no potential for that, or no opportunity or tolerance of any division or any brand or any organization within the company not achieving its business targets. And that's an extra layer of complexity and challenge. In terms of the question around innovation, I think there was a cultural shift that was one that the organisation was keen to move on. A lot of, particularly the R&D community, had been recruited on the reputation of GlaxoSmithKline and its scientific credibility, the rigor with which it puts behind its research, its clinical trials, the claims, all of the great work that is required, versus a business that needed to move more quickly. It needed to find and adopt new ways of working that would allow it to innovate safely, of course. Absolutely, patient and consumer safety should never ever be compromised. But the lead time and the mentality meant that, and the business urgency meant that every practical and thoughtful way of innovating in the consumer healthcare landscape needed to be considered, and permission from senior leaders to do that. The risk profile of the organisation when it came to these areas was not one of a pharmaceutical company. It was more of a, as you say, a consumer healthcare organisation. How that can be translated into a pipeline that could be demonstrated. Now, again, not a topic that was purely raised on day one. It was a journey, but you have to proactively think about this in terms of how you can reduce the trial dates, the life cycle of these things, and where you can be more creative, moving into new product areas, new adjacencies, new categories, and testing those boundaries in a way that perhaps would have been more difficult from a pharmaceutical perspective, and engaging the commercial organisation on that. And innovation is difficult at the best of times, as we know, because not every opportunity will land in the way that you'd hope. The numbers don't always justify the investment, so you have to be prepared for some challenges. So that comes back to the resilience of the organisation as well. But it's I think a problem that many organisations face.
Thank you, James. And maybe to open up the question on innovation, but not just about innovation on new products, but as well on technologies. There is, of course, the word that we couldn't do a webinar without talking about AI. There is a lot of developments in AI in R&D and automation in supply chains, for example. So in your different backgrounds, where do you see practical opportunities for digital transformation to enable scalable growth? And what pitfalls should leaders avoid? Claire, do you want to?
Sure. Yes, so I think first thing I would say is that there is a difference between AI and automation. And I think people often get those two things mixed up. So automation's been, in fact, both of them have been with us for a very long time, but AI, generative AI, is really the piece that's suddenly come to the fore, right, in the most recent times. But I think there are two sets of opportunities for organizations. One is your traditional automation, so your traditional machine learning, right, which is, let's say, taking repetitive tasks and automating them in a way that they're predictable, they're usually the same way of doing things. Those are sorts of things you often see in things like finance, areas where they're very, very clearly logical steps that you go through. And then there's AI or generative AI as well, where that's more taking, let's say, a step further, rather than just doing the same thing each time, is thinking for itself, right? So it's learning from what it's done and it's replicating, and then it's changing its behavior as it learns. And I think there's a place for both of those in organizations. My advice is to use both and think about, okay, well, what areas would benefit from automating a process? And that's, literally the almost boring, let's say, day in, day out processes that we're using automation to help solve. And then what areas could we use generative AI to do some of the higher order thinking for us, to speed up some of those other types of tasks. They could be more, let's say, developing a marketing concept, or let's say doing a market share reporting, something like that, right? So there's very different types of tools. My advice is not to go, let's say, all in one go and start throwing everything at it, because that's just never going to work. It's as James just said, lots of companies are going through change, and this is another change on top of that. So I would first think about, what is it you want to use it for? What do you need automation or AI to solve? Is it better creativity? Is it cost reduction? Is it, let's say, less waste? There are lots of different challenges that you might have as a business. Focus then on the biggest opportunity, and then think about which tools it is that you would want to use to help address that challenge. Because I think if you go sort of scattergun and try to cover everything, you simply won't get there. And even the biggest companies have always proved a point through one area or one function to start with, and then expanded those learnings into another area. So I think that's the big pitfall I would suggest that people think about, as well as not just dismissing automation and going straight for AI. Sometimes automation is actually enough, and it can deliver a lot of meaningful benefits.
Thank you, Claire. In the interest of time, there is the last topic I really wanted us to cover today, and Loic, you alluded it at the beginning about, Seva has always been at the forefront of growing and making sure to push the limits of the system to where it can. And so actually, I wanted to cover operational excellence today, just to make sure that it's part of the growth and it's what is going to support it. So James, maybe starting with you, but I would like to make sure that we cover your different opinions on it. In the transformation programs, we often see that embedding change sustainably is the issue, especially when it comes to operations. And so what are the critical factors to make sure that that operational excellence sticks beyond the initial rollout phase?
Thank you. I think I would answer that question by focusing initially on the role of senior leaders to be advocates for the change. I think that's critically important when any organisation of whatever size and complexity is undertaking transformation, is looking to challenge itself as to how it can be more efficient. The term operational excellence, as we know, covers a lot of different facets to the organisation. But I think where I've seen it done effectively at pace and at scale is where leaders have role modelled the behaviours. They've embraced and proactively communicated what is changing and why. It's really important people understand the why of a transformation, and also being able to see and demonstrate and understand the benefits of the change as well. Because otherwise, I think it's easy to stand at the sides and throw stones, and you can be a believer and an advocate, or you can also detract and distract from what's going on in the organisation. So I come back to sponsorship. I think it's really important that is understood. Transformation is often a long-term endeavour. It takes weeks, months, and possibly even years to really transform an organisation. And I think having, where you can, measures in place will help people understand progress. I know that will often need to be qualitative and quantitative data, as well as other different ways of looking at it. But I think if I was to land one point, it would be about how sponsorship from senior leaders is critical when you're doing this type of work.
Thank you, James. Claire, anything that resonates with your experience?
Yes, I think making change stick is a tough one. I think what I would suggest is, first of all, building common language in the business and using that consistently. So what are the 3-4 things that you really want people to remember, and using that every single time you talk about a transformation, even once you've done it, so that people remember why it's there, to the point that James made earlier. I think the second one was keep it simple, so make it really simple. So again, thinking about whatever program or change you've put through the organization, how do you make it really simple to keep doing it? So how is it? Is it documenting it? Is it the technology needs to be really clear and easy to use, but keeping it simple? I think the third one is having a really clear roll-off plan. So I think I've seen this happen many times where programs have a great team behind them. They've got a team running it, and they're all over the day-to-day. You might have a great tech team or project team, and then suddenly they all walk away, and then the business is left almost holding the baby, right? And they have many other priorities. They have many other things to do in their lives. So how do you make it easy for them to manage this going forward? Have a clear roll-off plan. Think about who could support it once people step away. Who is the champion, let's say, to escalate any challenges, and who do they speak to?
Thank you, Claire. And maybe Loic, just to run the question. So you've told us about the impressive growth of Seva, but in this new consolidation phase where you're trying to make sure that you have the basics for the next phases of growth, how is the company planning to organize its operations to keep supporting that growth and ensure client and employee satisfaction?
Yeah, thank you. And I think it directly following the comments made earlier by James and Claire. So, I mean, rather than operational excellence, I'd rather have, we want to have performance excellence. Okay, that's what we want. And James alluded, I mean, to bring the P&L where it should be. That requires customers to consistently, value what you bring. And everything needs to come from that single objective in a company that doesn't have extra resources, basically. And I think less and less companies have extra resources. So rather than, you want to have execution excellence to get the performance done, and you want to have the operations good enough to deliver, I mean, excellent results, in my view. So I know the operational excellence wording, it's a wording that everybody uses. But my experience, what you want is to have good enough operations, efficient enough. It doesn't need to be the ideal model. It just needs to be good enough, the exact minimum investment required to get to the the best possible results. And that's where I would start. So which means in the next phase, for Seva, and I guess it's valid for everyone, you're not trying to address everything. You pick pain points, limiting factors to the business, kind of a must-win battles. You pick 3, 4, and that's it. And there will be a lot of opportunities coming along the way. Maybe 1 out of 20 you will pick because you're a bit agile, actually, and that really makes sense. But you will actually deny most of the additional stuff because you need to deliver the change, operational improvement to sustain the growth in the case of Seva. And that takes years, and again, both of you said it. So you don't want to run a project, 6 months, 15 months, and close it, move on. It's Seva works on 5-year cycles, and through deep evolutions of the operations mechanisms and modus operandi, that takes a cycle. That takes a year to implement it, get it through, get it embedded. So I think less is more. Senior sponsorship, yes, that's critical. That's where all starts. Sustained sponsorship, but it only sticks if it simplifies people's execution and people's life, and it only survives if it brings value to help you achieve your performance. So I think whatever we do, is. And then if I look at Seva, obviously, as I said, you got a bunch of automation topics, that are actually on the line. You mentioned about supply chain management. I mean, obviously that's one. When you scale up, you're having sourcing from multiple continents, and the company has whatever doubled in 6 years. You want to add another 50% to the company in 4 or 5 years. You need to address that, to remain efficient. So that's a critical one. but then yeah, pick a couple, and that's it actually, and that's what we try to do. That most of our energy and resources and focus is not going to operational excellence, is going to customer satisfaction, product innovation, technology innovation, to bring differentiated value to the market and price it and expand it. And then in order to get there, once you've got your must-win battles for the business, then to pick, okay, what are the minimum viable operation setup I need to get there in 5 years, and then these 3-4 things, then we'll do it. So again, supply chain, because you mentioned it, is at the core, when you grow that fast. And yeah, you want to have systems that speak together. You want to have actually one code for a product across the globe, and things that can be obvious for people working in blue chips, but are not when you're in a company that has been growing organically, actually, and in a decentralized way. Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I think that's what I would share at this stage, except if further questions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the three of you to share your different perspectives on this topic. I'm seeing some questions coming from the audience, and actually one of them was the one I wanted to ask you to wrap this up, and we'll see, depending on time, how many more questions we can get in. But yes, if you had one piece of advice to give to leaders in the audience aiming to build a scalable, future-ready organization in life science, what would it be? Maybe we can start with you, Claire.
Yes, it's a great question, Katie. So thank you for that. I think, yeah, what's the one thing I wish I'd known and done at the start? I think probably get sponsorship in even earlier from those on the ground. So I did a lot of work both at Reckitt and at Alliance in getting to know the business, so getting straight out there, going to the countries, going to the teams on the ground, understanding how the business works, and learning from them, where the challenges are, which was super helpful. But then we spent quite a long time on both sides, both companies, where I've led transformation, spend a lot of time almost in your own group, then starting to design the answer, right? You start to design the solution of how do you fix this issue. And you often have to spend a lot of time together doing that. And that's usually done in a small team, whether it's a transformation team or a strategy team or something. I think what I would love to have done was socialize some of that thinking earlier with some of those stakeholders who I spoke to right at the beginning. And I sort of learned that as I went along, and then caught up, said, oh, right, I better go and do that. And actually, you know what, they gave me so many great feedback, so many learnings, that I was able to adjust the plans before we then revealed them to the organization. But I wish I had taken a bit more time to do that sooner.
Thank you, Claire. Yes, we see this again and again when we work with clients, the small transformation team wanting to get it right before going to see the leadership, and actually waiting and delaying a bit. And when they go, they're like, we should have done that before. It's a classic. Thank you very much. Loic, do you want to go next?
Yeah, maybe 2 words. Yeah, I think it's 2 legs in a way. Yeah, to keep running. That's true at individual, team level, and business. I think decisions level is as a stick to your DNA. Yeah, which doesn't mean you don't move. Yeah, because the second leg is agility. But stick to your DNA is don't try to copy. You have a company culture. You have your own activity culture. Leverage it. That's what's going to keep you running in the long run. And build in agility in everything, in the people you select, in the teams you build, or the way of working, and the design of your business activity. I think these are the 2 for me. I mean, if I have to pick 2, that I would say that doesn't matter the scale of the business, the size, the stage of development. Yeah, your DNA and always integrate agility as a pivot, yeah, to whatever you do. That's would be my 2 pieces of advice.
Thank you, Loic. And James?
I think I would remind myself of how much I've seen or learnt the fact that plans change, and you need to be, to your point, like flexible and adaptable and agile to those changes. I don't think you would expect these days to see a straight line of what you're trying to do. I think you need to be prepared to pivot, to shift expectations. but when you're doing that, fail faster and learn from it and recycle those learnings into what you're doing, because if you don't learn from what you've done, then I think you'll struggle to really make an effective transformation work.
Thank you very much. That takes us almost to the full hour. I have a few questions from that the audience submitted before we started. Maybe we have the time to go for one, and then probably it's going to take us to the hour. There was the one around how do you balance the push for growth and innovation with ethical obligations to your people, especially when resourcing constraints lead to overwork or project failure, which we haven't spoken much about. Yes, when things go wrong. So maybe, who wants to take that one, and we can finish with on a less positive note, but also part of life in big programs.
Don't mind, Loic. I can take.
I can go ahead.
Sadly,
Okay,
sadly, my job
start.
often involves doing this sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll start.
So I think humility is the most important thing I've learned, certainly working in corporate roles, because you're often in a position where you may be working on confidential projects, confidential information, and that can be quite difficult. It's not just difficult for those receiving change, positive or negative, but it's the uncertainty around that, but also I think difficult for the people running it and doing it. The first thing I think I would say. But in terms of how do you push through change, rapid change, without, let's say, burning out your people, which is, I think ultimately what you're saying there. It's all about prioritizing. So how do you really stay laser focused on what is important and say no to things and actually hold people to account on that? So being really clear that there are things we're not going to do because these are the priorities that we need to put through, and making sure that leaders are respecting that and standing up to that. And also CEO, quite frankly. So you need your whole C-suite to align behind that. And it's as James said earlier, it's difficult to drop your pet projects or your favorite things to do, but that's really what you have to do if you're going through transformational change. It's not a business as usual situation, and so you have to make some really difficult calls. And so that's the main thing. I think the best way you can respect your people is to do that, so that at least you can show them that you mean what you say.
Thank you, Claire. I saw that James had a hard stop and he had to drop from the call. Loic, I think you do as well. Do you want to add anything on?
Yeah,
what Claire just said?
one word. I agree. First of all, it's not something that you should do. It's something that is. I mean, the life of the success of the company depends on it. Yeah? So to run the change and burn the organization, then it was better not to do the change. Yeah, at the end of the day, so it's a lot of effort for nothing. So listening, yeah, and you said it. Humility, I think, the same. Yeah, listening is actively is probably core. The second piece, more proactive and more also to embark the teams, to go the extra mile on the other side, is to insist a lot on the why and the purpose of change and the purpose of and how the change serves the purpose of the company. And I think that's equally important, because that can also help the organization stretch for a while to get it done, because it is the right thing to do. Yeah, so I think it's a balance between both, in my view. That's
Great.
it.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to both of you, and to James, who had to log off. Thank you for sharing your experiences and giving your advice on how to build scalable growth. And well, we'll be sharing this webinar and continue the conversation as we go on. Thank you very much.
Good luck, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.